All right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Matt Schwab, and I'm the Associate Director for International Programs at Illinois State University. On behalf of the Office of International Studies and Programs, I would like to formally welcome you all to the first session of our Spring 2022 International Series titled ISU International Engagement. This series is one of many programs developed by our office to assist in comprehensive campus internationalization and emphasize the benefits of social, cultural, and linguistic knowledge beyond what is represented in our home countries. This semester, the series will focus on a wide variety of internationalization efforts taking place on the Illinois State University campus. All events will be available as Zoom webinars. As an attendee, you can submit your questions through the webinar Q&A function, which we will relay to the presenter after the presentation. If you have any questions or technical difficulties you would like to discuss with program staff, please put them in the chat bar and we will get to them as quickly as we can. It is now my distinct pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Illinois State University Vice President for Academic Affairs and Provost, Dr. Provost Tarhule. Dr. Tarhule joined Illinois State University in 2020. Prior to coming to ISU, Dr. Tarhule was Vice President and Dean of the Graduate School at Binghamton University in New York. He earned a master's degree and doctoral degree in geography from McMaster University in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Dr. Tarhule then received a postdoctoral fellowship from the Canadian Science Advisory Council to conduct research at Queen's University in Kingston, Ontario. Dr. Tarhule earned an additional master's degree in environmental resources planning and a bachelor's degree in geography, both from the University of Jos, Plateau State in Nigeria. Dr. Tarhule's scientific research has been published in prestigious international journals, and he has been the principal investigator or co-principal investigator for grants totaling more than $5 million. He has served as an editor and guest editor for several prestigious journals, as well as holding leadership roles in many prominent national and international organizations, including as a consultant to the World Bank and a member of the Executive Committee of the Board of Oceans, Atmosphere, and Climate, Association of Public and Land Grant Universities. It is my distinguished pleasure to introduce Dr. Tarhule to come and start our international series this semester. Dr. Tarhule, welcome.
Thank you so much, Matt, for that kind and generous introduction. And I want to say good morning, good afternoon, and welcome to everyone who is listening to this webinar. I think it's super exciting that we're able to hold this webinar, even if it's in person. I know that this is not the ideal way we would have wanted to kick this off, but given where the COVID pandemic is, I think we are grateful to be back in person and at least on campus and holding this workshop. Okay, I do have a PowerPoint presentation to show, so give me a few seconds here and I will pull it up. Okay. Matt, can you see my screen? Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
Thank you. So I want to begin by thanking the OISP and everyone who is involved in organizing this workshop. I know that the organization has had several challenges of late. Because of the pandemic, we haven't been able to bring students here as we would like to, or even go out to travel, which has meant a lot of disruption or challenges to your schedule. So I appreciate what everybody is going through to try and keep ISU's international engagement alive. I know that you've also suffered beginning not just with the pandemic, but even before that, to deal with a lot of inconsistent policies and directives from government about international students, which have made things very difficult. Internally, I understand, I know that you guys have had lots of dislocations. You got moved from FAL to Williams and then back to FAL. And then you've had a change in leadership. All of this could not have been easy. So I just wanted to begin by acknowledging what I know the office and staff are going through and to appreciate the work you've done. But I think this workshop is actually pretty timely because regardless of those challenges, I feel like we've got some direction. We've got a sense of where we're going, and at least we know what we're doing. So I think we're working towards new leadership for the organization. We're working towards a new structure. The pandemic is stabilizing, and I think in some ways, if we stretch hard enough, we might even see the end approaching. So I think there's new opportunities that open up with all of these changes. So I appreciate the timing of this workshop. Much of what I'm going to say is really like preaching to the choir for those of you who work in international engagement or those who are familiar. But I know we have several different people represented on the call, and even for us, sometimes it's worth reinforcing the message about why we do what we do and trying to remind ourselves about the importance of what we do. So I'm delighted to give this overview about internationalization initiatives here at Illinois State. It's probably appropriate to begin with an understanding about what internationalization means or entails. Again, I know this is preaching to the choir, but it's helpful for us to, it doesn't hurt to remind ourselves about the value of this. So one definition that's been very widely cited defines internationalization as a process of integrating an international, intercultural, or global dimension into the purpose, the functions, or the delivery of university education. Now, this definition has been around for quite a while. It's the one, as far as I could tell, that is most widely cited. And so more recently, in the literature, you begin to see a different type of definition and updating, if you will, of the definition of internationalization. And in some cases, you see the phrase comprehensive internationalization being utilized. And that is defined as a commitment confirmed through action. So it's not just words, it's not just what we articulate verbally, but what we do in terms of actions to infuse international and comparative perspectives throughout the teaching, the research, and service missions of higher education. So both of these are talking about what it is that we think encapsulates the definition of the mission of internationalization. Perhaps an easier way to unpack those definitions is to look at what is also referred to as dimensions or components of internationalization. So what kinds of activities do we think fit with this definition of internationalization? And this is just a selection of those. This is not meant to be exhaustive, just an illustration of the types of activities all the way from international student recruitment, alumni engagement, work abroad or study abroad or exchange programs, to internationalization of the curriculum, the creation of double or joint degrees, opening up foreign branch campuses, online learning, and so on and so forth. So it's a wide range, lots of room for almost anybody who is interested in the international education space to find something that they can do meaningfully. You might ask, why do we do this? Why is internationalization so important, and why are so many institutions so heavily invested in internationalization? Well, I think the rationale for this was very clearly articulated to my mind by our former president, Larry Deeds, in March 2018 at a signing ceremony of a partnership agreement with INTU, where he said, in today's globally connected society and economy, it is more important than ever that our students benefit from a diverse education and interaction with students from different backgrounds and perspectives. We don't live in a bubble. We live in a heavily interconnected world. And so if we don't prepare the students who have that global mindset, global viewpoint, and understanding about other cultures, then we're not serving our students properly at all. President Deeds continued, we aim to provide our talented and ambitious students with even more opportunities to study alongside those from other countries. We believe Illinois State will play a full role in the creation of the next generation of global citizens and leaders. And this ending point here, creation of global citizens and leaders, is something that you see featured over and over in almost any discussion on internationalization. Here we're looking at a joint statement of principles that was issued in support of international education by the US Department of Education just last year on July 28. And so in articulating a rationale for international education, they again bring up more or less the same types of concepts and ideas that President Dietz was talking about. So they state, in our interconnected worlds, many of our biggest and challenges are global in nature. To address them, we must work together, not just within the United States, but also with others around the world. What happens continents away can affect communities in the United States, and what happens here can have an impact in other nations. And I don't think this needs an explanation at all. We have seen what happens, what has happened with respect to the pandemic. We continue to experience what's going on with shortages of chips, supply chain disruptions. All of that, I think, underscores again the fact that nobody, no one nation, not even the most powerful country in the world like the United States, can afford to live apart from others. We are all impacted by what happens. And so this statement of support continued by stating that is why international education is vital. It promotes mutual understanding among people from different nations and helps ensure that Americans from all walks of life better understand the world and are prepared to effectively engage with our neighbors. Our neighbors here being not just in a geographic sense, but in a conceptual sense. Literally everyone in the world these days is our neighbor. And internationalization has a big impact, not just in terms of those large-scale geopolitical ideals, but also on the individual. So anyone who is engaged in international education can tell you just what a transformative and life-changing experience this is. As Mark explained, I myself was an international student. I still consider myself an international student. And my life today has been dramatically different from what it would have been, no question at all, if I hadn't left my country to study elsewhere. So those who engage in this process, whether they're going or coming, almost invariably and guaranteed end up developing new perspectives, different perspectives, an appreciation for diversity that you just don't get if you haven't had the opportunity to interact with people, especially in their own settings and environments. An opportunity where you can develop your own independent thinking and worldview, not just what somebody has told you should believe about other people. And really, as we know, there is no substitute for personal experience. It doesn't matter what you've read about, but being there, seeing it, smelling it, touching it, interacting with people, whether you're doing it as you travel or having the opportunity to have that level of very profound engagement with people from other cultures and societies who are here, there is no way anybody can teach you that or that you could reach that. So it is truly a very transformative experience. But beyond those larger ideas, this is also a very serious economic implications. So here we're looking at a report that says in 2018, international students contributed 45 billion US dollars, that's billion with a B, to the US economy. We're not playing with monopoly money here. This is serious money. And beyond the money, you can see the impact in terms of job creation. 458,000 jobs that are supported on the economies of international students. In fact, this report, ABC News concluded for every 7 international students that we bring, 3 US jobs are created and supported. So if you scale that down to our own level here at the university and look at the number of international students that we're attracting, you could almost directly translate that into the impact on jobs locally here in our state, in our community, and in our region. Because of this serious economic impact, this is a global competition. So what we're doing in terms of internationalizing or trying to internationalize, it's not just an isolated thing, not to our university or US in general. All states are very actively engaged in trying to increase their market share of the international business, if you will. So in 2019, for example, international students contributed 40 billion Australian dollars to the Australian economy, and that supported 130,000 jobs. I was especially struck by this latter point here. More than 40% of higher education sector in Australia, the revenues, 40% of the revenues come from international students. That's a lot of money. We have a budget of approximately $500 million a year here at Illinois State. If you calculated 40% of that, you'd be talking about $200 million. That tells you, contextualizes for you, I think, just how important economically international students are. As I said, this is not just the US, all countries. I've just given you two examples here, but it's really all countries. $22.3 billion to the Canadian economy in 2018. This is big stuff. And so realizing this personal, educational, economic impacts and all of the other impacts we didn't even have time to get into. Illinois State University set a goal in 2018 when we signed a partnership agreement with INTU to increase our international students by 10%. Or raise it to 10% within 10 years. So to go whatever the level was in 2018, make sure it's 10% by 2028. So where are we at the present time? On this graph, the light blue colors, you can read that against the secondary y-axis. That shows the head count. We're just about 550 international students here at Illinois State. And the red line here shows the percentage. So we're still under 3%. So we've got a ways to go if we are to meet this goal. So it's again important to remember what it is we're shooting for. We need this line to move up to 10%, and we need these numbers to be closer to 2,000. Now, you can see a step change in the bar graphs here and the trend in terms of our international students enrollment in 2018. That corresponds to the time when we signed an agreement with INTU, which to my mind shows that the partnership with INTU was working. Of course, the timing was spectacularly bad or unfortunate, because then it coincided with a number of geopolitical factors, political decisions that were outside of our control, and then, of course, the pandemic. Even so, I'm delighted to see that we've managed to maintain that level of student enrollment, and also therefore a percentage change. And it gives me lots of optimism that as we begin to put these challenges behind, we should be able to see another step change, reflecting the full potential of the partnership that we have signed with INTU. So why do international students come to the US? Lots of factors. If you look at the ranking of world universities, of course, it's no surprise that American universities, several of them tend to dominate the top 20, top 50. We are not there yet, but we're coming. So academic excellence, cutting edge facilities, career prospects, the opportunities for students to then stay back here and get a job and build a career and families, the flexible educational system that the US offers, cultural diversity, and very lively campus atmosphere. The two photographs I selected to illustrate this on the left tells it all. What we see here almost every summer weekend or fall weekend is not the general picture at every university worldwide. American universities are much more lively, much more dynamic than any university anywhere else in the world. We offer something that is the envy of the world and something that no university outside of the US can match. That sense of spirit and community and just engagement with others in support of the university is classically an American educational co-curricular activity. I can tell you when I went to university in Nigeria, I didn't even have a t-shirt with the university name or emblem on it. First, because I couldn't afford it. And two, if I could afford it, I probably wouldn't get it to buy. And so to see just so many students showing their institutional pride, I think it's something to behold. And I think it's something that we're always going to be able to sell to people outside of the US. It's a very evocative image indeed. But over time, as we have seen, and to no one's surprise, as we came out of the recession of 2008, 2009, we did see a steady increase in the number of international students shown here in terms of percentage increase in international students. But since about 2016, for a variety of reasons, we've had a downturn. I don't know if we're slightly positive this year, but it wouldn't, if so, it wouldn't be by much. And this is a reflection of all those headwinds and challenges that we're all very familiar with. I thought it was interesting to just again remind ourselves about where all of these international students come from. Basically, as you look at this chart, the countries represented on this map account for maybe 71, 72% of all international students. So a little more than half of those traditionally have come from China and India. It's important to keep track of these numbers because they're changing. China, for example, is setting itself up to become a net host country for international students instead of an exporter. And so I think that in the next few years, we will expect this market to change. I know those of you who work in this space are always tracking these numbers. But what it also shows, it's not just where the dominant movements are. As you read the report, you begin to see that there are other, maybe smaller markets around the world that have been relatively untapped, that I think open up opportunities, especially for smaller but entrepreneurial players like us to play in this space. Here we're looking at the students who go out to study. It's interesting to see that whereas we're getting over 2/3 of international students coming from Asia, the number of American students who go to Asia is only about 12%. And so there's sort of a mismatch geographically in terms of where American students like to go to and where the largest international students come from to the US. This is all fine. This is interesting. I mean, different interests, different reasons, different motivations, but I think it's an interesting chart to show. I also wanted to take a look at what international students come to the US to study. And as you can see on the left, 3 main programs dominate the interest of international students, accounting for over half, about 56% of all international students come to study engineering, math and computer science, and business management. In fact, I think last year I recall reading a report which said that 90% of all the students who come from India to the US study only 4 disciplines. This type of information is really important because it helps us in terms of how we develop our portfolio of program offerings to be attractive to international students. So here, obviously, we don't have engineering, and engineering is clearly the #1 program that international students come to the US for. But hopefully by this time next year, if we're having this workshop again, which I expect we will, hopefully we have an engineering program, and so we'll be filling that gap in our portfolio. But meanwhile, we have programs in mathematics and computer science and business management. So I think plenty of opportunities in those areas to serve the needs of those international students that want to come to the US and to ISU. So what are we doing? Last year, the Division of Academic Affairs held a major retreat at which we took a long, hard look at enrollment management, and we developed a strategy of enrollment management, anchored on 5 main pillars. As you can see here, right in the middle, internationalization is one of our major pillars of enrollment management. So beginning with, and this is not necessarily ordered in any priority sense, we said we're going to try and develop new academic programs in areas where we have a gap. And as you see in the previous slide, we do have a gap in engineering, which is an area that international students need, but we're working on that. We're also working on trying to develop a new interdisciplinary program in data analytics. Again, another area that we know has very high students demand and employer needs, but which currently is a gap for us. And so we're working in those. In step 2, we're trying to grow our opportunities in those areas, programs that we already have, but where we know we have some capacity for growth. But internationalization is a big one. So our partnership with INTO is currently undergoing renegotiations. I'm hopeful that we'll come out of that stronger and better informed in terms of what our strategy is going forward. But part of that is also creating new partnerships in places where we don't have partnerships. Other areas include, which are not strictly limited to internationalization, but I think internationalization creates lots of opportunities for us. Programs at the graduate level related to 4+1, 3+2, 2+2 type agreements. And of course, online education. Because with online education, we have the potential to deliver our programs to anybody, anywhere in the world. So all of these 3 major programs, even pillars, even if they don't completely explicitly fall under internationalization, contribute to that vision and what we're doing. And as we know, it's not just enrollment management, which we know has been coming at us for a really long time, but a lot of the other reasons for which we know it makes sense to do this. So I'd like to speak explicitly about a couple of initiatives that ISU is undertaking. As I mentioned, online education feeds into internationalization. And we realized during the pandemic that whereas we were able to move our programs online, we did so because we had to. We really didn't have a strategy or an infrastructure or even the personnel to do online education in the way that it should be done. And so as we are hopefully coming out of the pandemic here, I've created a new online education unit. It's going to be housed in CTLT. And as I speak, we have a national search for a director of that unit. My hope and the hope of everyone in the provost office is that we're going to get someone very experienced, hopefully someone who has already been doing this or has experience doing it, who can then develop for us a strategy about how we do online education, not only domestically, but also internationally. Last year, we also discovered another gap in terms of our infrastructure and readiness to do online education when the state of Illinois decreed that anybody who is teaching at an Illinois public university has to be able to do that within Illinois. Well, we can't do online education if we require everybody who is teaching at an online, one of our online programs to live here. In that case, it's really not an online program. So we are currently in negotiations with this law firm called Hogan and Lovell to offer us the services that will allow our people to be able to teach online, whether they reside in Illinois or not. So we are making great strides in terms of what it would take, essentially building the infrastructure to support an online education. The second is internationalization infrastructure. As Matt mentioned, because of our ongoing negotiations, or taking a step back because of our initial partnership with INTO, our offices responsible for international engagement were split. So we essentially had, by my reckoning, 3 different offices working in international engagement. We're going to combine all of that into one new office, which will be renamed Office of International Engagement. This office will take effect officially And this new name will begin officially on July 1 of this year to coincide with the new fiscal year. Again, we have advertised nationally to try and find an executive director who is going to lead that new unit and therefore become the face of internationalization effort at Illinois State. At the same time, we're renegotiating the terms with INTU. Because those negotiations are ongoing, I can't say too much, but I'm confident that we'll come out of those negotiations much stronger and much more clear in terms of our strategic directions going forward. The other thing I've begun working with Perry on that I'd like to be able to support you very strongly is trying to strengthen the budget for OIE going forward. So I'm currently studying that budget. I believe there's a meeting with Grace and Perry and other members of this organization with members of my team so that we can better understand where the weaknesses are and how we can shore up the budget, see those things that we could move into permanent funded lines, because we know that you're not going to be able to do the things we're asking you to do that you've taken over from INTU if we don't provide you the budget to do so. And I want to pledge my full support and all of the resources of the Provost Office to make sure that you have what you need to do what we need you to do. I understand also the challenges that you face and have faced over the last few months. I alluded to some of this at the beginning. I understand there's a case of morale, understandably so, because of all of the movements that you've been forced to move. That can create the impression that maybe internationalization is not valued at Illinois State. This is absolutely not the case. The budget issues I just mentioned, I'm going to try to work as hard as possible to try and give you a bigger, better, more steady, more consistent budget. Geopolitical issues, those are a bit outside of our concern. I listed here international competition just so to remind you of the enormity of the challenge that we face. We are a relatively small institution. We don't have much name recognition, at least in relation to some of the partners that we'll be going up against. We also don't have the same level of ranking and prestige, and again, some gaps in our portfolio. But despite all of those, these are not limitations. These are things to be aware of as we develop our own strategy so that we know we can turn our weaknesses into opportunities, and also trying to identify what our niche is. I think the last one listed here with respect to uncertainty about strategic direction, to my mind, we're well on the way to overcoming that. So what are some opportunities that I see? Here again, I'm repeating the slide I showed at the beginning that highlighted the dimensions or components of internationalization. I have highlighted in red some areas where I think we have relatively low-hanging fruit, so to speak, and we can make a big impact on. It doesn't mean that the ones in black we have accomplished. We have some ways to go, but I think these other ones in red, I think we could really make a big impact. Alumni engagement. So building a network of international alumni. In many ways, our alumni are our greatest asset in terms of recruitment. Any program that has many students from one country or region will tell you it always takes word of mouth. Somebody who comes through a program goes back home and tells their relatives and their friends about their experiences. If those experiences were supportive and rewarding, then we find ourselves getting lots of applications from students in those areas. And so some universities have actually intentionally built alumni networks around the world to amplify that type of impact where alumni are essentially our major recruitment assets internationally. So I think we have an opportunity to build that kind of network. Curriculum internationalization, I think it's something that we have a great opportunity, especially because of the expertise and technology that we've now acquired as a result of having to teach online. Here, this can be anything from incorporating more dimensions and examples and international examples into our curriculum, all the way to potentially having joint classes between students at ISU and students, for example, in Denmark or Chile, taking exactly the same class taught by an ISU faculty, where some students are doing it online, or one of our faculty goes out to another country, maybe in Vietnam, and teaches a class there, including his or her class here at ISU. We now have the capability to do that, and I'm hoping that we're able to take advantage of that. Joint or double degrees, where you have 2+2, 3+1 type agreements with other universities. This is something we ought to be able to do very easily, and I'm hoping that we actually intensify our efforts in developing those programs. Foreign branch campuses, if a lot of universities are now opening new locations internationally. And once that begins to happen at an accelerated pace, it's essentially what I liken to fishing upstream. These students are international. They have to come here to get into our program. But if other people are taking their programs to those students abroad, then they are capturing those students before they even have an opportunity to come here. So it's like they're standing upstream fishing, we are downstream catching just what they can't catch. We're not going to be competitive in that sense. So I don't see why we shouldn't be exploring the opportunity for creating 1, 2, 3 other branch campuses of ISU elsewhere in the world. As far as I can tell, there's nothing preventing us from doing so in terms of the statutes that govern our degrees. So I want to give a shout out to a couple of programs that I think are really doing a great job. They are not the only ones. I fully understand there's a lot of activity going on throughout Illinois State. So I'm using these 2 programs really as a stand-in for all of those activities. So if you don't see your program here, please, it's not a disrespect to that program. So I'm really proud of the work that the Wonshu Kim College of Fine Arts is doing. They have a 2+1 joint degree program with Shanghai Normal, their Tsinghua College. I know we are, just as with everything else we described, it's not ongoing now because of the pandemic, but that's a solid agreement that we fully expect to continue as we get past the pandemic, as well as a study abroad partnership they launched with Southwest University, also in China. I want to offer here my full support and willingness to collaborate with any program that is interested in developing these kinds of partnerships. Let's have a talk with my office, and we'll support you to the extent of our resources. I also want to give a shout out to the College of Business. They have a very successful international program, a Bachelor of Science in International Business in Panama. This last December, the Dean of that college and the AJ Samant and the Associate Dean Terry Knoll and myself went to Panama. And you can see on the right here a picture of Panama City. It's an amazingly beautiful city. And where we met with Oscar de Leon. This is him here. He is the proprietor of this institution. And so Panama is a great opportunity, great program, and I think it can become a model, a template for the types of programs we can develop around the world. So I want to commend the College of Business, especially Dean Samant, for his leadership of this program, and use this opportunity to tell everyone listening, if you're interested in going to Panama and participating in this program, I would fully recommend it. It's a city with really developed infrastructure, outstanding people. I fully recommend it. So what's the message I'm giving here? Basically, I'm telling you all the provost has a packed bag and I'm willing to travel. If you want to develop a program and you need me to come along with you to help seal the deal, all you have to say the word, and I will come with you and make sure that we develop those programs. So take me up on that challenge and let me know what you're developing. So as I get towards the end here, I was asked to share some of my vision, but I have decided to say it's not just my vision, but a challenge that I'm extending to the Office of International Engagement. These are some of the discussions that I'm looking forward to having with the candidates for this position. What are some of the things that I think we should be doing? One, I'd like us to expand the Panama Agreement. At the present time, it's in business, but why couldn't we expand it to other programs that ISU offers in education, in finance, in the STEM disciplines, humanities, whatever that may be? So I would very much like to expand that agreement, but then build on similar models, maybe in 3 to 5 new other locations around the world. I would dearly love to have an agreement similar to the Panama program, somewhere in Africa, somewhere in Southeast Asia, somewhere in the Middle East, somewhere in South America. So for anyone listening, if you have an opportunity to walk through your network and your partnerships to build something like this, please walk through OIE and my office. We would fully support you. We should explore the possibility of developing foreign branch campuses. What would it take for ISU to have a campus in Morocco or Nairobi or Bangkok? I think we got to think big. There's no reason why we can't do this. There are plenty of other state universities just like us that have foreign campuses elsewhere. When I came from SUNY, the SUNY system had an entire campus in Istanbul, and another one in South Korea, in Seoul. So there are state universities that are beating us to the punch. But I think we have an opportunity to find other places where we have a niche, where we have a comparative advantage and build similar types of things. 2+2 or 3+2 agreements, these are very easy to do. And there's a hunger for these types of agreements and partnerships in international programs. There's really not much reason why we shouldn't be doing more of those. I would also say that we need to increase international enrollment by 5% in 5 years. I think that's more than doable if you look at the trends that we saw just before the pandemic hit. But on the other side, in terms of the students that are leaving ISU, we ought to be able to increase study abroad by 20% in 5 years. So these are my challenges to you, as well as increasing online degree programs that appeal to foreign students. I'm going to leave these slides with Matt and Linda, and please take them as both my vision and my challenge to you. So I'd like to say a very special thank you to Perry Shun and Matt and Linda and Jackson and the entire team at OISP, into MDI, the Study Abroad Partners. I appreciate what you do. I regret the experience you've gone through, which I know has not been very rewarding, but I give you my word on record that I stand, and so does President Terry Kinsey. We stand ready to support you to the full extent of the resources of ISU to achieve this ambitious and really overdue expectations that we have of your office, and in particular the new office that will take over from where you are. And I appreciate your perseverance and what you have gone through to get us to this point. So with that, I'd like to say thank you so much, and see if you have any questions for me. Thank you.
All right, everyone. Again, thank you, Provost Tarhule, for that amazing presentation. To those in the audience today, if you have questions for Provost Tarhule, please put them in our question and answer function, and I will relay them to the Provost. I do have a couple that we also have here as well. So Provost Tarhule, just to get us started, in regards to town and gown relationships relating to internationalization efforts, is the institution talking with community businesses such as State Farm or Caterpillar or now Rivian to discuss the assistance we can provide in helping recruit and train international talent?
Matt, I know you're asking the question on behalf of somebody, but I'm pretty sure you and Perry can answer that much better than I can. So recruitment begins with what we can do abroad and then what happens when the students are here. So what happens when the students are here, I think is what we call onboarding. So the onboarding experience, we can significantly improve in terms of our town and gown relationship. To my understanding, and in our discussion with Into, part of what has hindered the partnership with Into has really been unfortunate in terms of timing. We need Into. Into is good at what they do, and they will deliver the numbers that were envisaged in our original agreement. But the pandemic just never gave that partnership a chance. But as we talk with them, they are super excited, for example, about our engineering program. And you can see why. This is one of the programs that international students need the most. And so without having programs that international students need, we are a bit disadvantaged in terms of our competitiveness. And most of those programs you talk about, those areas you talk about, particularly Rivian and Caterpillar and so on, the biggest area we can work with them is engineering. Of course, we have a State Farm where we could develop programs in international business and actuarial science and so on. So I do think we have lots of opportunities to expand on whatever we're doing in those areas. I'm not fully sure the extent of our programming. So I'm not dodging the question. I'm just acknowledging that we have an opportunity to do more in that space.
And I understand that our contract negotiations with Into are still ongoing, but we received a question, will Into allow or accept agreements with other similar organizations?
No. In general, with these partnerships, they will only allow you to sign an agreement with only one institution. So one such organization. So notice, for example, that Shorelight, which is one of the biggest players in third-party recruitment, they can't even compete here. We can't even think about them because they have an agreement with U of I. And so because they have U of I, those agreements tend to restrict the university. It tends to be exclusive, essentially. And you understand why. It's very expensive for them. It's good money if they can get it going, but it's also very capital intensive on the front end to get it going. And so if they allow the market to be diluted, neither partners would benefit. And so at the present time, we can only work with Into as long as this agreement is enforced. But I think the negotiations that we're making, we've managed to get rid of what I think are some of the most vexing exclusivity clauses that we have with them. I'm actually very pleased with where we are, and I think there's only just a few minor, well, maybe not so minor, but just a few points of disagreement. We're pretty close to an agreement that is mutually beneficial. But the key answer to that question is we can only work with Into for the next 8 years.
What role, if any, does the study of languages other than English play in ISU's vision of promoting global citizenship?
It's an interesting question, and I'll answer it the way that I answer a lot of these types of questions. Those visions don't have to come from the top. I'm not a linguist, and a lot of the leadership we're not linguists. Our role is to take a vision from the bottom up and support it. And so if we have a languages or linguistics program that has networks and connections and partnerships with other places around the world, and somebody says, hey, I have an opportunity to build a Spanish language program, a French language program, or a study abroad in Chinese or whatever that language may be, and I'm looking for support. What we do is provide the support. The space is open. We are looking for opportunities. So I would turn that question back to the person asking and say, if you see an opportunity and you have partnerships and you have the passion for it and you think you can develop a program in a different language and you want a partnership or an exchange agreement or whatever that may be, please come aboard. Write us a proposal, come to OIE, talk to the people there, come to the provost office, and let's give you some basic information about how the process works. We are a facilitating organization. There is no limits to what we can do in the international space. And what we're looking for are willing and active partners who have ideas that we can build upon.
What would you say to someone concerned that international students might take a seat away from a domestic student?
Sorry, I missed a few words.
What would you say to someone who was concerned that an international student might take a seat away from a domestic student in terms of upping our international enrollment?
It's a valid question, but that's the kind of question I would be more concerned if we were at capacity. As I showed in the enrollment, every university in the US that I know now is worrying about an enrollment cliff. So if we were at capacity, where we're turning away students already, and here we are trying to expand on internationalization, I might be concerned. But we are not at capacity. Last year, we were down 500 students. The year before that, we were down more students. Every provost in my position is worried about the possibility of under-enrollment. And so internationalization becomes an opportunity to sort of plug in that gap. And so at this point, whereas I accept that concern on a theoretical level, practically we're nowhere near where that should be a consideration. But beyond that, keep in mind that as I showed that the quotes at the beginning, internationalization is a big part of the study experience, right? If we had no international students, internationalization doesn't mean that all ISU students have to go abroad. A big part of how we internationalize is bringing students here. Then we get to meet partners and know people and make friends and have an understanding about other places, whether we're going there or not. So this is a big part of the learning experience. And so given that it's, I think, really essential to having that global worldview for our students, and the fact that we're worrying about under-enrollment, not over-enrollment, I am not at all concerned at this point.
I'm looking for other questions. Study abroad programs are very expensive for students. Do you have any plans to support students who cannot afford to take advantage of study abroad programs?
That's a good question. This is a very good question. It's not just that they are very expensive. There's a question of equity. We end up having a situation where some of the students who most need it are unable to take advantage. If you come from families that are not earning enough, then obviously you're probably working part-time and you can't afford to go abroad for study. Whereas people who come from families that have the resources, they probably take vacations abroad anyway, whether as part of study abroad or not. So this is a legitimate question. And I can tell you that one of the things I'm hoping we can do, at least one idea I have at the present time, is that once we begin the next campaign, fundraising campaign, I would very much like to see scholarships for study abroad as a major part of our campaign team, specifically so we can raise the money to defray the cost of students who want to go abroad but are unable to do so for financial reasons. So that's something that Pat Ligerman, the Vice President for Advancement, and I have already discussed. It's not something I'm just coming up with now. So we've actively talked about this as a possible future campaign. But beyond that, as you saw in those list of dimensions to internationalization, there's more to internationalization than study abroad. There are other ways in which we can give our students an opportunity and exposure to international cultures, even if they are not physically abroad themselves. But in fact, if that's what they want to do, which I think I really would like to be able to do if I had the opportunity, our goal is to try and make sure that we create additional scholarships to support those students.
All right, I don't see any other questions. So you're off the hook, Provost Tarhule. All right, that concludes our series presentation for today. If we did not get to a question, or if you would rather ask your question in private, please feel free to email internationalseminar@illinoisstate.edu, and we will relay your question to our presenter to be relayed through email. We would like to thank you, Provost Tarhule, for taking your time today. We sincerely appreciate you being with us to discuss all of this, to reaffirm your commitment to campus internationalization, and to explain all of the things that we see that are going on. So thank you very, very, very much for taking the time to be with us today.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Linda, and thanks to everyone. Thanks for having me.
And we would also like to thank all of you who were able to join us here today to watch this presentation and support the series. We are proud to continue to offer this series to ISU and the Bloomington Normal community and provide information on issues that impact all of us across the board. Next week, we will be discussing the creation of institutional international partnerships. So we hope that you will be able to join us for that. If you have not yet done so, we invite you to register for the rest of the events in this series. Visit illinoisstate.edu/seminar series to find those events. Thank you all for joining us today, and stay safe, stay healthy, and go Redbirds. Thank you all.